Hey there, folks. If you're paying attention to the news, and I imagine all of you are, you know what we're going to talk about today. But who is we? Well, we includes me and my guest, Jack Posobiec. Jack, I never know how to describe you. A lot of people follow you on social media. I watch you often on Steve Bannon's show, War Room. Where do we begin? Let me just frame things. Steve Bannon, as I would expect, was the first to say that the Trump administration blinked by recalling Bovino and having a nice phone call. I think a lot of patriots are sickened at the thought of a nice phone call with these, how do you describe them? Traitors, the mayor of Minneapolis, Frey, and Governor Walz. What is your take?
Well, Eric, yeah. So we're here, of course, watching in real time as the events fold. I've been hitting up every source I have, White House, DHS, throughout the administration, even those on the ground in Minneapolis, where at Human Events, we've had a team on the ground for about three and a half weeks now, ever since the initial shooting, this agitator situation. I think it was January 7th. So we've been in constant contact, waiting to see exactly what's gone on here, because one of the things that people have been reaching out to me, pointing out, is saying, look, the whole reason that ICE needed to be augmented by this massive surge of federal agents was the fact that the governor and the mayor were not working with ICE to be handing over these criminals, to be helping them go on these missions, these raids, to be able to roll up some of these violent offenders. And so the question I have is, okay, there was an interesting phone call. Does that mean that the state is now going to be providing support to the federal government for the enforcement of these laws? Essentially, are we cracking the sanctuary city policies, which have always been completely illegal, but we know that they have not been upheld? We know that these laws have not been upheld. And so are we going to see this working together of state and federal? That's really all it comes down to. And if that's the case, the redeployment makes total sense, in my view, because you'd want to then have those forces to be going into other areas like Lewiston, Maine, or Phoenix, Arizona, where I understand there was a series of raids last night, or others. And so I think that still remains to be seen. But let's not mince words. What we're seeing on the ground in Minneapolis is nothing short of a communist insurgency in the Midwest.
Okay, hold on. Just in case anybody's not tracking, ladies and gentlemen, are you listening? Okay, that sounds like hyperbole, except it's not. A communist insurgency. These are Marxists. These are people at war with America, at war with our system of government, at war with anyone who believes in our system of government, certainly at war with we, the people who elected Donald Trump to govern us, and who elected him specifically because we like his idea of deporting illegal immigrants. And so you have people here on the ground in places like Minneapolis who are at war with all of that. And what you just said, Jack, the reason I get triggered is because I think a lot of people do not understand the nature of evil. You cannot compromise with evil. You cannot play patty cake with the devil. When you're dealing with evil, these people will do and say anything to win, anything. They will lie. When they're attacked, they play the victim card as though, well, we didn't do anything wrong and you murdered one of ours. And that's what we're seeing. So we expect the Trump administration, after what we've been through with George Floyd, after what we've been through with everything in the last 9 years or so, to be wise to this. And I think some of us are worried that a nice phone call with Walz or with, I don't know. Why do you think that our friend Steve Bannon said that he believes that the administration blinked?
Well, I think, and, having talked to Steve on and off air about that, and I think his concern, of course, is will we be seeing a turn up or a turn down of the escalation and the tempo, the op tempo of these immigration raids, because this is the key issue of MAGA. The illegal immigration is the issue that really separates the Trump movement from sort of the Jeb Bush, Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan wing of the party. This was the central animating issue that gave Donald Trump his runway to become that nominee all the way back 2015 when he came down the golden escalator. And of course, his speech was largely about illegal immigration. He was the only one willing to take up this issue. So now that we're seeing the actual execution on those policies, the people have voted for him a number of times. The one big beautiful bill, it gave that huge budget to ICE to be able to conduct these mass deportations. Now we're finally, at long last, a decade into this thing, decade plus, seeing those policies play out on the ground. And unfortunately, because you have communists and these agitators making it messy, they're to do these situations to do this. And what people need to understand is the communist wants the chaos. They're using the chaos to create situations to smear the government in power, because then they go to their media allies. They will turn anyone into a martyr. It doesn't matter if you're a criminal. It doesn't matter what you did. They will wash that all away and say, look, this was a person just walking down the street, or a mom just dropping her kids off at school. She wasn't running her SUV at federal agents. No. You know, this was someone who was she's on the side of the angels, and these terrible, horrible Gestapo ICE agents did them in. And what they will do is they will use these, unfortunately, what Lenin called them were useful idiots. There's Lenin's phrase, useful idiots. And we're seeing that play out, because what Lenin's policy was, he called it a policy of revolutionary defeatism. Because you and I and normal people might say, well, how could you run a city like this? How could you run a state like this? You're running it into the ground. You're hurting your economy. You're doing all this, but you're missing the point. They want the city and the state to fall, because once they do, they can turn around and say, this is the fault of Donald Trump, and you then must give us total power. Taking power is all they care about.
Correct.
And for a moral person, for a person with a conscience, we don't think that way. It's hard for us to think that way, but that's how they think.
Well, that's the point. And so this is when you separate the sheep from the goats, the men from the boys. When you see people blink, I remember who was it? Was it Senator Flake or somebody? Who was the one that was in the elevator during the confirmation hearings of Kavanaugh? And this is when you see what people are made of, when they kind of bow to the screeching harpies or whatever it is. That's what we're seeing right now. In other words, that anybody says like, whoa, we've gone too far. You think, no, if you understand that you're in a war with evil, they are simply doing what they do when you attack them. They screech and they lie. They hide behind women and children. This is what Hamas does, right? We're going to put our weapons in a hospital or whatever. And then if you attack us, we're going to say, oh, look, you attacked
and a nurse, right? So they've got a nurse.
I mean, it's unbelievable to me how naive. It's one thing for your average person to be naive, because we're all living our lives, but our leaders need to be wise to what's going on. And I have to say, I do get concerned that the president could be too concerned with optics, and that's what the media and the left play on. That you don't want to look like a bad guy, and I think that that's the question. Are we going to allow? I mean, another thing that I wonder about is, how is it possible for a governor like Walz to pull this? I mean, how is this different from firing on Fort Sumter? You can't say that you're seceding from the federal government when we, the people, have elected someone to do something, and you're saying, well, that's fine, good for you. And if you want Lincoln to be your president, that's fine, but he's not my president. We have a history there. That's not okay. We don't allow rogue states to decide when they want to comply with the federal government.
Yeah, we fought an entire war over this. It's fairly settled. I should say, since 1965, that that the states are, in fact, the supremacy clause of the Constitution does, in fact, hold that federal law does, of course, overturns or overcome state law. It supersedes it. And so there is no role. And this comes up again and again. Jacob Fry, in the beginning of this, when he said ICE should get the F out of Minneapolis, and you scratch your head, because if you're a student of the Constitution, a student of American history, you know that a city does not overturn the federal government. The state does not overturn the federal government. The federal government supersedes them all. And so the federal government, of course, covers all U.S. territory. That includes every single one of the 50 states, all of our territories from Puerto Rico to Guam to American Samoa to Washington, D.C. So there's no question that federal immigration law does, of course, apply. It doesn't matter if you're in a blue state or a red state. Donald Trump is still president of all of the states. But the rhetoric that they're using is so dangerous because they know, look, Tim Walz, he knows exactly what he's doing. This is a guy who went to China 30 times. And when he was there, the Tiananmen Square massacre, June 4th, 1989, was taking place. And it is my view that I'm a guy who went to China to learn about the Chinese Communist Party, and it said, my God, we can't ever let this happen again. Tim Walz went to China and he took notes. He went to Mao's China, he went to the CCP's China, Deng Xiaoping, and he said, yes, this is how you take power. And so you question, why is it that 2020, George Floyd, it kicked off the way that it did. It looked like a Maoist insurgency. Now we're seeing 2026. The Maoist insurgency seems like it's happening again. And I would submit that Tim Walz knows exactly what's going on because he himself went to China to learn it from the CCP, to learn this model. What did they have in the Chinese Communist Party, particularly the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s? They had these groups called the Red Guards. And the Red Guards were the communist youth. And we wrote about this in our book on humans. They had the communist youth who then were sent out into the streets to be the enforcers of the revolution. And so if you didn't believe in the revolution, if you were someone who was suspected of hate speech or spreading misinformation or being they actually use this phrase, right-wing extremist, then you could be pulled out of your job, you could be pulled out of your school, you would be put into the struggle session, and depending on how you whether or not you submitted in that struggle session, which, by the way, what you just said about Jeff Flake in the elevator, that's an example of a struggle session with the Red Guards. So if you submit, they might let you live. If you refuse to submit, well, we all know what happens then.
The fuse has been lit, and tonight, while everything might feel the same, the ground has shifted beneath your feet. On this day, January 28th, 2026, the U.S. dollar quietly crossed a line most Americans won't recognize until it's far too late. After a violent global sell-off, our currency has cratered to its weakest level in 4 years. This isn't just another bad market day. This is a financial ambush. We're witnessing a global scorched earth takedown of the American economy. The nightmare is here. The system is being hollowed out by global saboteurs so the radicals can seize power, leaving patriots like you to pay the price with your life's work. This isn't just volatility. It is managed decay. International insiders are executing the Sell America trade, pulling money out of U.S. assets to force the kind of emergency measures that lock you out of your prosperity. At the same time, the green light has been given to sacrifice your purchasing power. As the dollar's decline is brushed off as good for business, the markets have heard clearly your hard-earned savings are being sacrificed to a failing paper system. With national debt now screaming past 38 trillion and endless spending, faith in the dollar is eroding, creating a blueprint for national surrender and total digital dependence. History shows that when a reserve currency enters this phase, the people holding paper are the last ones protected. So while the media debates narratives, central banks are doing something very different. They're hoarding physical gold at record levels. Gold doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about emergency mandates or digital freezes. It's the only asset that remains independent of banks, governments, and the off switch of the administrative state. You cannot afford to be a bystander while they tank the dollar. You need a defense that operates outside their theater of war. I've partnered with America's Financial Freedom Intelligence Service to get you a critical new briefing titled The Dollar Takedown Survival Guide. defending your family and wealth from the globalist siege. This intelligence report is essential for anyone who values truth, faith, and American sovereignty. It reveals why moving a portion of your savings into physical gold is the only safe ground left before the next market freeze. Don't wait for the bank doors to lock. Visit MetaxasGoldIRA.com today and claim your free copy while supplies last. That's MetaxasGoldIRA.com. Today's decline was the largest one-day drop in nearly a year. Secure your wealth in a territory they cannot touch. That's MetaxasGoldIRA.com for your immediate dying dollar defense.
Well, I want to stay on this, but I also want to ask before, and I'm not clear on what's happening, but before you alluded to the possibility that Governor Walz would accede to the idea that, yes, he needs to turn over, malefactors to the federal government, to ICE. Why would he make that deal? In other words, I'm not clear on what cards is President Trump holding that he could get Governor Tim Walz, who's the man you've described, who's a villain, to go along with this, or to get the mayor to go along with this. I'm just not clear why that's being floated, or what cards Trump would be holding, unless he threatens to send in troops, I'm just not clear what you think the calculus is there.
Well, I mean, there's a number of pieces of leverage, and I think we all need to go back and remember that this didn't start. Remember, Operation Metro Surge started at the end of last year, so at the end of 2025. But these communists, these agitators that have been flooding in from all across the country, they only really got activated after what? After the Somali fraud rings were exposed in Minneapolis, and many of which were tied directly to the administration of Tim Walz. So go back to the timeline here. They get exposed. Tim Walz is directly associated with it. Then he drops out of the governor's race. Remember, he had just announced that he was going to run for re-election.
Okay, hang on. First of all, I just want to thank you for reminding us and for framing this, because I get so caught up in what's happening today. What you're talking about is absolutely crucial, that this horrendous theft of taxpayer dollars, this Somali fraud, was exposed. You just said it. He drops out he says, I'm not going to run for re-election. And then he says what? That I'm not going to finish my term. I'm not even clear on the details.
I think he's finishing the term, but he's essentially a lame duck now.
But it's a very dramatic move for him to make, which causes most of us to think, well, it's because he's in big trouble, and he knows he is in big trouble. They have the goods on him.
It certainly seems that way. And so in my estimation, they've got all that leverage in terms of that from the federal government. Who knows what they've uncovered? Because I've had Secretary Scott Bessent on Human Events Daily. We've interviewed him a number of times. He says they're digging through these numbers and finding the money flows. We just saw, by the way, I think it was the New York Times even admitted that the Biden Department of Justice had Ilhan Omar under investigation for campaign donations that may have been linked to this fraud. So even Merrick Garland had put Ilhan Omar under investigation for this. So this is not something that's a partisan issue at all. This is about taxpayer dollars and the misuse of those taxpayer dollars. Because, gosh, we all know how politics works. Do we really think that none of these Somali businesses were donating at all to campaign coffers of Walz or Ilhan Omar? None, not a single one of these business leaders or community organizers donated at all. I would say that's strange credulity, and that's certainly something that if I was an investigator on this, would be looking for. And then to say, okay, so that's the way the circle is closed. They get the fraud from the taxpayer dollars. It goes to the community. The community donates to the campaign. And then when they become governor, they look the other way on the fraud. So we certainly see that piece. I'll put that aside. The other piece of leverage, to answer your question, that the president has, of course, here is the Insurrection Act. And he's absolutely been clear that he's willing to use this. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he called up Governor Walz and Jacob Frey and said, look, either you guys comply or I'm going to press the finger on the Insurrection Act today, and I will federalize the National Guard, and I will send either the National Guard or active duty military troops, which is allowed under the Insurrection Act, to your state. The choice is yours.
Okay, and why do you think Walz and or Fry would agree to that? In other words, it seems to me that part of the Marxist playbook is that they would say, bring it on. It will just make you look like the authoritarian Nazi bully that everybody knows you are. Is it because
there's one piece I want to add to this mix, which I think answers the question. And the piece that answers this mix, I spoke at the Scott Adams Memorial this past weekend, and Walter Kern, the great writer, was there, and he's actually from the Twin Cities area. And the thing that he pointed out to me is he said, Jack, don't underestimate the level of corporate power in the Twin Cities. 17 of the Fortune 500 companies, so 17 out of the 500, are headquartered right there. You're talking Target, Best Buy, so many, United Healthcare, which, by the way, Luigi Mangione had assassinated the CEO of United Healthcare. That's headquartered in Minneapolis. And so corporate America has a huge outsized footprint right there in Minneapolis. And you want to talk about campaign donations, you want to talk about control, you want to talk about corporate power. Those are the guys who really call the shots when it comes to these politics. And they don't care. They'll look the other way on illegal immigration, on Somali importations. They don't care at all about that. But what they do care about is making sure that things go smoothly. And it seems to me that a lot of this happened right after corporate America. They put out that statement along with, I think it was the NBA team came out as well, saying it's time to de-escalate. It's time to put things down. And it seems that a lot of them went to the Democrats and said, look, if you guys want any future in politics, you're going to work with the federal government now because this has to stop.
Well, that's incredibly helpful. And Walter Kern is brilliant. I should reach out to him because this is a piece that I hadn't thought of. I mean, I forgot that Target was based in Minneapolis, that all these other corporations are based in Minneapolis. It's an amazing thing, isn't it? That, I mean, when we think of Minneapolis, it's a confusing picture because we think of all of these, lunatic leftists, frail white women blowing their whistles. I mean, you talk about something that seems pathetic. Everything about them seems pathetic. It's like the No Kings marches, it just seems so pathetic, so open to mockery. The fact that they're blowing whistles is so, it's like, how can we do something that literalizes the shrill factor? How about if we blow whistles? So when you think of Minneapolis and you think of these people, these shock troops, the useful idiots, and then you think of corporations that are involved, there's a lot here. Now, why do you think our friend Steve Bannon thinks that the Trump administration blinked? Because it sounds to me, I'm hoping, obviously, that they didn't blink.
Well, I think it remains to be seen. I want to know. So what I'm going to be looking for today and for the next few weeks is, look, they haven't said that Operation Metro Surge is going to be ending anytime soon. At the end of the day, it's all about putting numbers on the board in terms of deportation. So Tom Homan is now being deployed in. Greg Bavino is being redeployed out. And so the question is, will the operation continue? If this operation continues, you might even see numbers go up. So that's something that my team is going to be looking for on the ground there. And also, I would love to see if not only if the operation continues, but if this potentially frees up some of the federal assets to start going after these groups that are highly funded, highly organized, and highly trained there on the ground in Minneapolis. And what Human Events field correspondents are telling me is that they have Antifa anti-ICE spotters. So these watchers, these spotters on every single block of the city. They're in hotel lobbies. That's how they know where the hotels are, because they have spotters in the lobbies. They've got people in cafes. They've got people all over, and they coordinate with these signal chats. They have convoys of cars that are chasing ICE officers around the city. It's complete madness. And Tim Walz knows that he is complicit. And there's even some indications that they may have other state officials and city officials involved in these signal groups as well.
I don't know what the term is for this, but the level of sophistication and coordination, again, it sounds like a war on the American people. I mean, this doesn't.
Insurgency.
Okay, an insurgency. So what does that look like legally, an insurgency? I mean, how do we allow an insurgency? How do we allow these folks to be coordinating like this? I mean, it is a communist takeover. It's an attempted communist takeover of our country. That's what happened. You know, when I hear about all this coordination, I guess James O'Keefe put out a detailed post on this. The level of coordination, that alone is astonishing. This is not some grassroots uprising.
No, and this, of course, is something that we've detailed for years in our work, that the communists, they organize like this. They use the organs of state power. Remember, many of these individuals have jobs either at, this is why they closed the schools, right? They didn't close the schools for weather. They closed the schools so that the teachers and the teachers unions could go out there and support these efforts. They closed down a number of city and state agencies because they want those union workers to be able to go out there, flex that union muscle. And then Minnesota is absolutely a union state. And so many of these people, their jobs, their livelihoods, they don't come from the private sector. They come from the public sector. And so because they don't have real jobs, they're able to go and spend so much of their time doing this. They're funded by this fake money, essentially our money, to be able to go and be full-time activists and full-time agitators. That's why they don't have to worry about showing up for work. This is their real work. Everything else is just a front for them. And unfortunately, the system has gotten so bad that when they want to respond, when they want to have the ability to put on a show of force, and that's it. Make no mistake, that's exactly what the Bolsheviks are doing on the ground in Minneapolis right now, a show of force. They're able to do so with plenty of funding in their coffers from the taxpayer.
Well, when President Trump tasked Secretary Bessent to go after this, I know that, you know, Trump doesn't do that lightly. And if you put the Secretary of the Treasury on it, he's a bulldog. He's on it. So is it your suspicion that they have already uncovered stuff? Because we've been talking about this. Do they have the goods on these folks? Because again, it's a level of fraud. The word fraud, some words really don't do justice. They're not really the right words. Fraud doesn't sound like this is theft. Even that doesn't sound. It's to steal from taxpayers, people who work hard, who pay their taxes, to steal their money, to work against them. I mean, that's what the mafia does, right? That's what criminal organizations do. Here we have federal officials doing it. Here we have unions doing it, or these fake NGOs doing it. This is the scandal of our lifetime, and it's been going on for decades. Do you sense that we're going to get to the bottom of it, that we're going to get to the bottom of it in California? Because it does seem to me that if we were able to deal with this, you know, we'd be able to build new bridges, pave every road, get every kid a free schooling and healthcare. And I mean, the level of fraud here is just, it's astonishing level of fraud.
Well, I'm waiting to find out because, you know, they talk about the federal debt, the federal deficit every year. And Elon Musk had, of course, when he put Doge out there, this was one of the key things that he had targeted was how much of our federal debt and how much of our federal deficit every year goes to fraud. And he was saying it could be as much as $100 billion. And to your point about who are they stealing from, and let's be clear, too, because they're not just stealing from the taxpayer. The money the people that money was originally intended for, these are children, these are the disabled, these are people who are needy. Those are the true victims of theft here. And because the media doesn't want to talk about that, the media wants to, because it's intransient, right? Because it's indirect. Because you only see the arrest of the perpetrator. They never talk about the actual victims here. And they go in, and Secretary Bessent went up and brought up people who run actual autism centers for children in Minneapolis. And they say we can barely get any funding, or what we get is a trickle compared to what the Somalis get because it's all directed towards them. Meanwhile, they've got teachers, they're great teachers who study this stuff, know how to work with special needs kids. They can't get the funding that they need because it's all being redirected to these scammers. This is an international criminal conspiracy, and they have been looting the treasuries of our country for years. This is part and parcel of the illegal immigration system that President Trump and Stephen Miller and so many others have been fighting for years. And it goes to show you just how much the media will lie, because they won't bring up any of the stuff that you and I are talking about. They'll simply talk about, these poor immigrants who just came here for a better life and to try to better themselves, and look at how they're being demonized and the xenophobia of President Trump. They won't sit there for a second and talk about the fact. By the way, when they were going after these fraud rings, and many of them have been prosecuted by Democrats too, but that's I could sit here and talk for hours about that. They were trying to bribe jurors with briefcases full of $150,000 in cash to get them off. The one feeding our families, I think they're up to like 100 different defendants that they've gone after in this case over and over and over. And by the way, all of this was happening during 2024 when Tim Walz was the vice presidential candidate for the Democrat Party. And funny how the mainstream media seemed to miss all of it.
Hey, folks, before we get back to our guests, I just want to say a lot of people donate when there's a headline, but MDA, Magen David Adom, doesn't get to slow down when the news cycle moves on. MDA is Israel's national EMS system. That means emergencies don't stop today, tomorrow, next month. Heart attacks, accidents, trauma, surgeries, blood shortages, they're constant. Keeping that system strong requires ongoing support. When you give to the American Friends of Magen David Adom, you're funding the basics that make everything else possible. Ambulances on the road, blood banks for trauma and surgery, training for first responders, and equipment that's used every single shift. This is not symbolic giving. This is practical, life-saving support. If you want your donation to have direct, measurable impact, this is one of the clearest ways to do it. Go to savinglifeisrael.org. That's savinglifeisrael.org. What do you make of the Rhino Republicans? I have to say, I'm so disgusted. We all, many of us woke up in the last number of years realizing we were played for fools, believing that people, whether it was George Bush or that, they're basically with us. And then Trump emerges and suddenly everything changes and you realize these people were never playing to win. They were just drifting along. And so here you have John Thune, who, in case anybody doesn't know who that is, he's a eunuch who seems unwilling, to do something dramatic, like abolish the filibuster. What do you make of these folks? I mean, they seem already to be looking beyond Trump, that they just want to cling to power. What is your sense of what is going to happen? Because I think more people than ever are awake to where we are right now.
Well, what's unfortunate is that there's a lot of these Republicans, Senate, Congress, and you find them in state parties all throughout the land, where they think that, okay, Trump's already a lame duck, he can't run again, which, by the way, this is why it's actually smart politics for President Trump to tease out the potential of running for a third term or fourth term, as he says, because he's fighting this perception that he's a lame duck to keep leverage on the other Republicans. And the minute that takes off, he loses a lot of that political capital. So what he's doing, and what they're doing, I should say, is they want to wait him out. They have this calculation that once Trump goes, that the Trump base will simply just go back to voting for them. But of course, that's not what we saw. We saw this with the Tea Party. We saw this going into 2015, 2016, when they thought that they could hold the coronation of Jeb Bush as the heir apparent to the Bush dynasty. And President Trump came in and smashed the Bush dynasty before he smashed the Clinton dynasty. These uniparty individuals had no problem whatsoever with winning elections, but then going on and not actually changing anything in our country. And we put them up and they lost time and time again. 2008 with John McCain as the standard bearer. 2012 with Mitt Romney as the standard bearer. We tried this style of politics. It does not work. And it certainly doesn't work nationwide. President Trump formed a new coalition of working class people, of middle class people to come together and say, I will fight for you as a populist coalition. That's what won the Rust Belt. Remember, when Mitt Romney was running, Paul Ryan was his running mate. Neither of them could even win their home states. Neither of them could win. So Mitt Romney couldn't win Massachusetts, and his father had been the governor of Michigan, loses Michigan. Paul Ryan loses Wisconsin. They're from the Rust Belt, and they couldn't even figure this out because those voters are sick and tired of the Republicans who do nothing. And I'm from Pennsylvania myself. I see it all the time. People say, we'll vote for you if you do something for us. But if not, we're out. And so what I would say to all the Republicans who think that those type of voters are just going to show up for them in 2026, show up for them in 2028. You got another thing coming, guys. You will be absolutely voted out because all of those people will stay home.
I was going to say, like, we need more lunatic candidates like President Trump. I'd like to push Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller to run for office. I mean, we need people out there, probably because people are hungry for more of what's been happening. I have to ask you, do you think Ilhan Omar or any of these people will be brought to justice? Do you think James Comey will be brought to justice? So many people are wondering what team Pam Bondi is on. Are we ever going to see anything?
Well, Comey, we know, has been indicted, but unfortunately, in a number of these places, one of the issues that keeps coming out, so play that out. Let's say Ilhan Omar gets indicted. The question then becomes a question of venue, because we've already seen that this magistrate judge in Minneapolis refused to sign the warrant for Don Lemon. That was last week. And then it comes out that I may have been the one to release this information, that his wife works directly for Keith Ellison, who's the attorney general of Minnesota. And so you have this situation where these Antifa types are they're in the water, they're in the bloodstream of the system, they're in the administration of the judiciary in so many places. And so even if you take them to court, many cases, the juries will say, oh, you know what? That's a Trump thing. I'm not going to vote for him. So there were people who were assaulting federal agents in Washington, D.C. The jury let them off. The jury said not guilty, even though they had him dead to rights. There were people who, again, Don Lemon, dead to rights in terms of this conspiracy to go and, again, invade a church, to raid a church. Again, talking about communist tactics from Mao and the Bolsheviks. That's exactly what the Bolsheviks did. They raided churches in the Spanish Civil War. And so the problem we have is that what venue are you going to use? Because you have to have a judge and a jury that are willing to be impartial. And that's a question, impartiality, that actually goes into the mindset of the person who's sitting there. That's why when we have these systems, when we have these incompatibilities, and we talk about our system essentially being an honor system, if you would start injecting these different ideas, Bolshevism, or bringing in people from the third world who have totally different conceptions of collective justice versus individual justice, they are not compatible with our Western system, which relies on jury trials. They're just not. And so these are much, much bigger problems that I think a lot of people have really decided to deal with.
Well, what gives you hope, Jack? What gives you hope? Because you're a fighter, and we're not fighting to lose. We believe that God is with us. That I keep saying we're in the third existential crisis of our history. The first was the revolution, that I'm finishing my book on the American Revolution. The second was the Civil War. We are in the third existential crisis of our history. And the only person that I've heard talk about this the way I have, and I told Maureen, is Steve Bannon. I said, he says we have Washington, Lincoln, and Trump. It seems clear we are in an existential crisis. And I believe it's the Lord's will that we win, that we go back to our founders' vision of who we are as a people, which is fundamentally Christian, that's inescapable, and that we're at war with Marxist, globalist, atheistic forces right now. So I'll just say again, what gives you hope that, what are the signs of hope at this moment that we will win?
Absolutely. So I always try to put things in terms of a timeline. I always try to look at things in context. Look at where we were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the Tea Party was seen as a fringe movement of, rabble rousers. It was not seen as anything that would ever have any political force. And yet you saw that populist fervor rise up and then take over the entire Republican Party. And of course, we're still talking about some of the friction points on that, where some people refuse to go along with the populist message. Donald Trump comes in and becomes the avatar of that movement, the leader of that movement. And we see the fact that you and I are sitting down having these conversations because we've come so far. We're now finally seeing the execution, the fulmination of these policies, of things that people used to share an article from Breitbart, or back when Drudge was, on the right side, and say, oh my gosh, when are we going to do anything about that? We're actually in the phase now where those ideas, where those comments that used to just sort of go by the wayside in the comment section of articles and blogs are now actually being discussed within the administration, are being implemented by the administration. And look, it's tough, but this is a fight that we have to have. This is absolutely a fight. And I believe, to your point, existential, I believe that what's going on right now on the ground, this Battle of Minneapolis, is an existential fight, not just for the United States of America, but for Western civilization. Who governs, right? Who governs? Vladimir Lenin, he had the famous axiom, who governs whom? Whom? That is the ultimate question. Will the people be the masters of our own destiny, or will we allow the revolutionaries? Will we allow the subversives to be the ones that sign our destiny, that push us off, that destroy our country, and allow this revolutionary defeatism, whereby they destroy our cities and then they rise to power? I disagree. I fundamentally believe that the American people ultimately will be on the side of seeing our project. Today is, of course, this year, I should say, is the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. We can live for another 250 years and beyond if we make the steps now to have this fight.
Well, agree with every syllable. The 250th, you probably didn't realize the official term. You didn't get this memo, Jack. I'm the one that gets to tell you.
Oh my gosh, I forgot. No, I was there when you said it.
The Super Centennial, ladies and gentlemen.
Super Centennial.
Yep, the Super Centennial. And how beautiful that President Trump is our Super Centennial president. Jack, just a joy to get to hear you share. It's just a shot of adrenaline. We need hope. So grateful for you and your voice. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Eric. God bless you and to all the audience.
God bless you. Hey there, folks. I want to tell you about a coffee company I genuinely admire. 10 Boom Coffee, inspired by the faith and courage of the 10 Boom family. This isn't just great coffee. It's coffee with a mission. Ethically sourced, expertly roasted, and rooted in Christian values. If you care about what you consume and who it supports, this is coffee you can feel good about. Go to 10boomcoffee.com. Use promo code ERIC for 15% off your order. That's 10boomcoffee.com, code ERIC.
Hi, everyone. If you were injured in an accident, listen up. We have legal professionals standing by to answer your questions. You can find out if you have a case and how much it's potentially worth. I'm Gina Bellich, along with Super Bowl champ and two-time Pro Bowler Vernon Davis. So, Vernon, tell everyone watching who should call right now.
Well, Gina, if you or someone you know were injured in an accident that was not your fault, give us a call right now. You can find out if you have a case and how much money it's potentially worth.
Thanks, Vernon. You know, the phones have really been busy. So what kind of calls have we been getting?
We're getting calls about all types of accidents, from car accidents to slip and falls, and so many others. So if you were injured in an accident, don't go at it alone. Call for a free case review and find out how much your case is potentially worth.
Thanks, Vernon. You heard the man. Call now to find out how much money you qualify for.